Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday, and welcome to today's webinar, which is Business Banking with TD, Navigating Credit Requirements and Cash Flow in a COVID-19 Environment. Just some housekeeping before we begin, just to let everybody know this session is being recorded, so we will be able to share it with members who couldn't make it today. Also, just a reminder, unless you're presenting or asking a question, we ask that you stay on mute just so that it makes it a lot easier for the presenters. And if you have any questions at all during this, please put them down in the chat. And at the very end, we'll go through and moderate the questions right there. So yeah, so down at the bottom, you've got the chat. So please put your questions in there. Before we get started, I just want to say that tomorrow morning we have another session called How to Get Discovered on Instagram, and it starts at 10 a.m. So if you're looking to register for that, there's still plenty of time. All right. So I would like to introduce our presenters, James Lundergren, who is a Senior Manager Commercial Services, and Robert McNally, Senior Manager of Small Business Banking. So they're going to get started today, and we're very happy to have them here with us. All right, so take it away.
Perfect, Tanya. Thank you very much. And, I really have to commend the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. You really have been exceptional, I think, to this period in terms of trying to keep up with everything and really engaging the community overall. The whole ecosystem, I think, here has really benefited from the leadership that's been shown. My name is James Lundergan, Senior Manager of Commercial Services, and I'm a part of the leadership team for New Brunswick and PEI's Commercial Banking Group. And I'm delighted also to be able to have the partnership of our colleague Robert McNally. He is the Atlantic leader for small business, and it's great to be able to have him as a co-presenter today. I think I know for myself, and I think for all of us, one of the things that really helps with I think our mental health at this time is to, when we reflect over the last 3 months, I always try to be able to stop and think of those things that I'm really grateful for. And I first would like, so I'm going to start with a couple acknowledgements. First, certainly for our frontline workers, all the essential workers, you've kept society going. And, it takes a lot of courage to go through what we have at the start, especially, and even now today. But thank you very much for that. For our entrepreneurs, you're the backbone of the Canadian economy. And this has probably been one of the most, well, if not the most stressful period we've ever had. And with everything that you're navigating right now, operational, financial requirements, and the ingenuity that we've seen, there's lots of examples in New Brunswick where we've seen those, some companies here that have really found an opportunity to participate in not only fighting COVID-19, but thinking differently about their business, which is great. And you're so important because businesses and employers used to sustain the community, and that's why we're here today. And finally, to all of the business community, when you think of whether it's our Chamber of Commerce, accountants, lawyers, insurance brokers, all of my colleagues, not only at TD, but also the other financial institutions, this has been a really challenging period. And I know all of us have wanted to be able to help our communities out. And this has been a very stressful time for us all as we try to deal with information that's coming in and trying to be able to activate some of these programs and get them out there. And of course, the environment keeps changing, and that's something that we're all navigating together. So I think given right now that we're seeing the restrictions lift and we're seeing more businesses open, this is creating a very complex environment for us all. And along the way, there's no doubt there's going to be some credit requests that will be required to be able to help a lot of the businesses out there be able to navigate their working capital requirements and be able to get operations up and running. And I think this also, it's important, I think, in this to emphasize that this is a changing environment, that we all do need to work together. And credit experience may look different at this point in time with lenders. It involves some additional due diligence and, trying to be able to figure out what this is going to look like for your money as it's coming in and as it's going out of your business, and participating in multiple different programs, and what the plan is going forward. So the purpose of this presentation today is my colleagues and I, we're going to have a chance to be able to look at some of the key concepts behind business credit, and be able to give some direction, I think, as to how you work with your lenders going forward. I'd also like to be able to acknowledge my colleagues that are on the line today. We do have our District Vice President, Brian McIsaac, on the line, as well as my other colleagues you can see here, Andrew Friel, Matt Lynn, Scott Bale, Rob McNally, of course, was with us, Patrick Jiggins, and our Equipment Finance Specialist, Carol Couture. And if we look at our agenda for today, I'd like to be able to identify some other people that are on the line with us today, and we're really grateful for their partnership. So you'll see at the very end, we will have some roundtable discussion and some Q&A opportunity with representatives of Opportunities New Brunswick, Business Development Bank of Canada, as well as Export Development Canada. So I think in that roundtable, hopefully we'll get some good perspective from everybody, high overview, and then also be able to get some questions from everybody out there so that we can know what you're thinking. And if we don't have the answers, at least we'll know what's important right now, and hopefully we'll be able to take that as an opportunity to be able to follow up. So for today, myself and Rob, we will be covering off a few key concepts here. We wanted to be able to look at financial health and planning, really looking at what your liquidity requirements are and how you're managing cash flow right now. Rob's going to take a chance to be able to share some ideas and perspective on that. Going forward from there, I will be able to talk a little bit about demystifying the business lending process and let you know what lenders are looking at when they receive a credit submission. And of course, be able to talk about the opportunities to work with your relationships and different business networks out there. And in the end, there's also some, in this environment we're in right now, Rob has some great advice and some other ideas to be able to share. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Rob right now to be able to talk about financial health and planning.
Thanks, James. I'm going to start really by just talking about how important it is for you to understand where you stand in your business. As a business owner, it's always been vital for you to understand your numbers, and that's more true now than ever. And it starts with knowing your point in time situation or your balance sheet. What's your business net worth? Assets less liabilities. This is a starting point to understand what kind of flexibility you might have to weather the storm. What is your personal net worth? Do you know your credit score? Often business lending, especially at the smaller end, can be linked closely to your personal financial situation. Next, you need to understand your revenues and expenses. Where were you before the pandemic hit us, and where are you now? It's been about 10 weeks since the lockdowns really took hold, so you should be able to have a fairly good idea of what's happened to your revenues at this point. One thing that gives lenders a lot of comfort is when a business owner really knows where they stand. If you tell your banker that you think revenues are down at least 50% because of the pandemic, that's okay. But if you can tell us that you know your revenues are down by 59% from 10,000 a week at this time last year to 4,100 a week now, that is great. It'll go a long way towards instilling confidence. And the same holds true on the expense side. Know in real dollars what you're spending each week. Go through your credit card statements and bank account if you need to. And I'd recommend looking at it on a weekly basis at this point versus monthly or quarterly, given how quickly things are changing. So now that you know where you stand, even if it's not a pretty picture, you might be surprised at how empowering it feels to move from a general sense of dread to an accurate picture of where you are. And this is just the starting point. Next, it's time to make some adjustments. If you've identified that you're cash flow negative by, say, $1,000 a week, you can start taking concrete steps to work that number down. What can you do to increase revenues? Can you increase your online presence, move to deliveries, shift to a new product or service? What can you do to reduce expenses? I know many of you have already made the heart-wrenching decision to lay off employees or reduce their working hours. What other expenses can you go after? Think about your cash conversion cycle. If you buy goods from suppliers, give payment terms to customers, and/or hold inventory, there may be an opportunity to free up some cash flow. If you normally pay for your goods in 30 days, is there an opportunity to stretch this out to 60 days? In good times, collecting accounts receivable can fall down the priority list. Can you make sure that your customers pay their bills on time or even early? Do you normally hold 60 days worth of inventory, and can you reduce this to 30 days? Taking any of these steps can help reduce the amount of cash that is tied up in your cash conversion cycle. Next, what payments can you delay? Rent and principal payments are the big examples here. Keep in mind that when you defer payments, they aren't going away. Understand how you'll make up the gap in future payments and what the costs are for deferring. Don't forget deferral of payments on the personal side as well. All of this information can help you build one of the most important tools a business owner can bring with them when meeting with their banker, a forecast. If you show up with a weekly cash flow projection, your banker's confidence in you will increase dramatically. I've worked with many business owners over the years who were reluctant to provide projections because they were afraid things would change. We expect projections to change. That's okay. The value of a projection is not that it'll be exactly accurate. If you understand the underlying assumptions and use them to create a benchmark, you now have the ability to quickly make adjustments. For example, let's say your plan assumes $2,000 a week in sales. If it turns out you only bring in $1,800, you can quickly make adjustments, staffing, purchases, investments. By the same token, if your revenues are higher than planned, you may also need to make adjustments to inventory, accounts receivable, you may need more room on your line of credit. If you don't have a plan, you may not realize until it's too late that changes are needed. As businesses start to reopen, it's even more important to have a projection. With so many unknowns, this may seem counterintuitive, but remember, it's not about getting it exactly right. It's about knowing when you need to make adjustments. The last thing to consider here is to understand what funding options are there to get you through any shortfalls in your cash flow forecast. Do you have personal resources that can be invested, and will that work for your family? Have you exhausted all of the government funding options available? CEWS, CEBA, local programs? Can you use all of this great information you've gathered to access more credit from your bank? Can you hold something in reserve in case you need to make those adjustments we talked about? Whether or not you need more credit from your bank, these exercises can be incredibly empowering. Know where you stand, know your current cash flow, take steps to improve your cash flow, know the resources available to fund your shortfalls, have a plan, and be ready to make adjustments when things inevitably change. Now I'll turn it back over to James to talk a little bit more about what your banker's thinking about when she reviews your loan request.
Thank you, Rob. I guess if you look at business credit, sometimes it could probably seem a little bit of a mystery. So what I'm hoping to do here is be able to share a couple of the key concepts that are here to be able to give you some perspective when you're working with a lender, the key things that they're looking for. Oftentimes you'll get a business plan, and sometimes it could focus on other areas, much of the focus in terms of looking at the opportunity. But there are other things that need to ensure that, I guess, the understanding around what your business is and making sure that you understand your business model. So if we look at a credit request when it comes in, there are three key concepts, if you were to, not to oversimplify, but to bring them in, because it can get complex. But the three main concepts we're looking at are around character, capacity, and collateral. So if you look at character, character is a broad term. It could mean a personal reputation. It could mean a business reputation. How long has that business been operating? What is the reputation of the industry? What is the experience and the leadership team that is a part of that business? Who are the advisors? Looking as well about timely information. So your year-end reporting, is it being submitted in a timely manner? Do you have internal management information systems that can give you a report as to what the standings are of your business at this time? And of course, credit history. Repayment history is important. It doesn't tell you the future, but it does give you something to look to when you look to the past. And finally, I guess another idea is the financial commitment to the business from the shareholders. Is that commitment there to be able to inject working capital if required? Have they done it in the past? Are they able to do it now? Sometimes it's the ability to provide a personal guarantee to their business. These are all important things, I think, when you look at the concept of character. In terms of capacity, there are different metrics that are looked at depending upon the industry, but some of the key ones that are here that we look at is cash flow. So looking at the ability, if you look at that term EBITDA, and I don't like acronyms, so earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. If You add those figures up and you put it relative to looking at what the principal and interest payments are that you have for your business and those obligations. That does give you a ratio and show the ability to make that payment. Another concept around working capital, current assets versus your current liabilities. What is the working capital that's available in that business right now to be able to fund the obligations coming forward? And final concept here around debt. So what is the equity base of the company? Often called leverage. In terms of looking at collateral, collateral is really the last piece that a lender really wants to look to, especially if it's you're a tier one lender, like a chartered bank. You're lending toward the ability to make payments in future and the character and the ability to do so. And collateral is important, and there's different forms of collateral. Those hard assets such as real estate, for example, those are a little bit easier to lend to at times than other assets that are depreciating. But really, collateral has to be the last resort in all of this. It's important to be able to make lending decisions and business decisions that are going to be sustainable. And security or collateral is very important. And an important part of that, but also looking at there are different types of lenders out there. For example, Business Development Bank of Canada is on the line with us. They focus a lot on the underlying value of the security that they're taking. So there are different lenders out there, but typically your chartered banks, your tier one lenders, they are really around cash flow, balance sheet, and income statement lenders. So security is important, but it is not the be all end all. Finally, in terms of the environment that we're in right now, and for lenders, and even dealing with the complexities of some of the lending programs as part of the stimulus program, there has to be an understanding around looking at what the historical earnings of the company have been and the ability to service debt payments prior to COVID-19. And that's going to be important going forward. And to speak to Rob's points earlier about looking at cash flow and be able to do projections, that makes this really important because this is an extraordinary period. And it's all about looking at historically what the business has done, but what does it look like going forward? So that's really important right now to be able to kind of take into account what lenders are going to be looking at. And they need to be able to try to work with you to be able to understand the financial and the operational impact of everything right now and what the recovery looks like. So it's really important not only to look at these year-end results, but to be able to, as Rob had mentioned, to be able to have your weekly and monthly projections out for the next period of time. Next piece I'd like to talk about is around relationships. This is the time for managing relationships. It really is. If you look at all of your suppliers, your debtors, your clients, being in contact with them, understanding and communicating what their requirements are and yours are right now. Collaboration is key. Never has there been a period, I don't think, where advice is going to matter more. So if you look at your relationships with your lawyers, your bankers, your accountants, your insurance companies, every professional here is going to be able to add a different lens. And it's really important that you communicate with all of these parties right now. It's also a time, I think, to reflect on the resilience, the piece around looking at what the bench strength is for your business and the advisors that are currently there. This is a time to reflect and be able to think of how, going forward, do I have what I need for my business to be successful? And I guess the other concept is looking at what does in a post-COVID-19 world, how does it work for working with your current clients as well as the prospects that you have for your business right now? How is this going to change the behaviors and their preferences for doing business? So it's a big time to be able to reflect. But in all of this, I think whether we look at it as individuals, as professionals, we have to be human. Everybody is going through an extraordinary period right now. And I think we have to be somewhat patient, but make sure that we collaborate and that we do communicate. So leverage your networks out there. This is a great time to be able to reflect. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob to be able to talk about the current environment we're in right now and some key quick tips to be able to share to be able to help the business community.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I'll finish off with a few kind of quick additional tips that you can use both in the current environment and going forward. The first is to embrace online banking and cash management services. In this era of physical distancing, there's a whole host of services that you can use to help you do your banking without having to come into the branch. Services like TD's remote deposit capture or mobile deposit allow you to deposit checks from your home or office. Banks also offer night deposit options for making deposits at all hours without going into the branch. At a minimum, you should be signed up to view your accounts online. And this really ties into my next tip, which is to be on the lookout for fraudsters. Unfortunately, fraud has always been a big issue for businesses, and at difficult times, the criminals come out even more. Talk to your account manager about fraud prevention tips, but at a minimum, you should be checking your account activity daily and be very careful about clicking links and opening email attachments. Your bank will never ask you for your password or other sensitive information via email. Next is talk to all of your providers. So you may have talked to your bank about a principal deferral. What about a low rate credit card option? Talk to your insurance providers. Are you driving less? Can you reduce your premiums? What about your telecom providers? Don't forget your personal expenses as well. If you're doing more online sales, have you talked to your merchant provider about their online payment solutions? One important thing to keep in mind is to keep your minimum payments up to date if possible. This is going to help protect your credit score. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you do need to miss a payment, let the lender or the provider know in advance. Finally, don't forget about your mental and physical health. These are extremely stressful times. Don't forget to exercise, meditate, connect with friends and family, take a step back. And if you have employees, check in to make sure they're doing the same. James, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Rob. So I guess in terms of being able to sum this up and some final thoughts, be human, reach out, stay in contact with, engage your advisors. There is advice. These are the times to get it. Leverage your network. The other thing is mindset. Never waste a crisis. And I think that saying has become from Winston Churchill. There's been different US politicians that have used similar quotes. But I think, what can we learn about this event? And what does it look like in the new economy and post-COVID-19? What can we do looking forward? And I know there's been lots of examples out there that we've seen of businesses that have been thinking outside the box and going forward. And I've seen different news articles, different things, and it's inspiring to be able to see those examples of those who are taking advantage of the opportunity and making the best of it and thinking going forward. Financial health, understand your cash flow, your capital requirements. What does it look like over the coming weeks and months? This is key for survival of any business. And it's also something that your lenders are going to be speaking to you about. What are the operational and financial requirements you have going forward, and being able to tell that story? It's a very complex environment for all lenders at this time. Their objective is, it's really not much different. It's no different than yours. They want to survive, your business to survive. They want it to thrive and be healthy. So when you go through looking at working with different lenders and credit requests, tell your story. Make sure that you give them an insight as to the character of your business, the capacity of your business. Look at the different pieces of security that you have available. You're going to have there may be situations you'll get in where you'll be trying to take advantage of multiple programs. So it's really important to put these pieces together and that everybody works together and collaborates as we go forward. So that finishes off the key part that we have for the presentation. And what we'd like to do is be able to have a roundtable discussion, as well as be able to get be able to hear the questions from the audience. So to start things off, I will be asking our Vice President, Brian McIsaac, to be able to speak. But first, I wanted to be able to introduce and be able to thank Brian Nugent of EDC, David McConkey of BDC, and Seth Black of O&B, a lot of acronyms. But to be able to have you folks with us around the table right now, it means a lot to us as partners, and I think it means a lot to the business community. So thank you for taking the time to do this. And I'll have a question for each of you in a moment. But Brian McIsaac, if you're on the line, I'd like to be able to actually ask you a question. I'd like to be able to ask about, in terms of looking at TD and what we're doing right now to be able to help the community out right now. These are difficult times, and I'm just wondering if there's any comments that you can provide or insight around how we're helping communities right now.
Sure, James. First off, great job to both you and Rob, providing a lot of information here today. Before I jump into your question, I just want to emphasize something that you and Rob both mentioned around communication. I think right now we're definitely in in uncertain times. And I think as we move forward together, I think it's important to communicate. I think communication's always been a very key tool of business and any function of our life. But in this period that we're going through right now, I feel like communication is so much more important. There's a lot of information shared here today. There's a lot of programs that have been shared via many media sources, many organizations. So I think it is important to engage the partners that you work with, whether it be your lawyers, your bankers, your accountants, the Chamber of Commerce, other resources in the community that you can utilize. So again, I think the communication is important, understanding your numbers and understanding your options. So just to touch on some of the community side. So COVID-19 pandemic has impacted us all on a very personal level. To be clear, we've asked our colleagues across the country to step up to meet the demand head on and also continue to provide exceptional community minded, even during this challenging times. So while COVID-19 has created many challenges for each and every one of us, I do want to take a minute to acknowledge that in our neighboring province of Nova Scotia, individuals, families, and communities have navigated through unimaginable tragedy and uncertain times over the last 6 weeks. TD was there and happy to support the Strongest Families Institute with a gift of $100,000. This support is provided to help with mental health and people suffering during this time. We're also proud to support the Halifax and Regional Military Family Support Resource Center with a $10,000 donation. This created comfort care packages for the HMCS crew members and their families. I also wanted to share that we are honored to be honoring all of our commitments here at TD. Examples such as the Harvest Jazz and Blues Festival. While we wish this could go on in the fall, unfortunately it will not, but we will continue to support this organization so it can go on in 2021. Finally, I wanted to talk about the TD Resilience Initiative, which is allocating $25 million to help immediate and long-term organizations to deliver services during the COVID-19. I'll hand it back to James, but wanted to tell you that we are here to support you through this, whether it be on the community side, the business side. TD is here to support, and we're always here to provide our support to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And I know that's a marquee event here, so it's great to be able to hear that continued support for the community. But the Harvest Jazz and Blues Festival, I think we're all a little bit lamenting about, unfortunately, that being postponed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to some of our other partners on the line. And I'm going to start with Brian Nugent of EDC. He's a senior account manager over there. And Brian, I'd like to be able to hear a little bit, get a high overview of what EDC is doing right now as a response to COVID-19.
Thanks, James. Maybe just a mic check, make sure everybody can hear me. Okay, great. So yeah, back in March 2020, I think kind of the key development for EDC, the government of Canada came out and announced an economic stimulus package for about $40 billion, known as the Business Credit Availability Program. So that Business Credit Availability Program, ultimately it's administered through the financial institutions. There's two ways that companies can access it. So there's a loan guarantee where EDC will give a loan guarantee for 80% to your financial institution in order to access additional capital. It's really meant for companies who have experienced cash flow issues as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we provide an 80% loan guarantee, as I'm sure my colleague David will mention. The other avenue is through BDC. They provide a solution along with the banks as well. But the key message really that I want to let you know about is that about a week later, after that March 20 announcement, the government of Canada came out and basically broadened EDC's mandate, enabling us to have domestic power. So domestic power sounds kind of funny. We're not superheroes or anything like that. But what it is, basically, typically, our mandate allows us to support companies who export. They sell their products and services to companies outside of Canada. Whereas with these domestic powers, it gives us the ability to utilize our working capital solutions, our risk mitigation tools for companies who do not export and probably never will export. So really that, if you think of the bucket of companies that typically EDC is able to support, it's had been those who are only exporting, whereas now really it's any company within Canada. If you've been negatively impacted by COVID, there's many programs out there. And again, if you're not exporting, that's the key message, that you do not have to be exporting. Although our name is Export Development Canada, as of now, our programs and services are available to everyone. So that those domestic powers were granted until December 2021. We've had these powers in the past. So during the financial crisis of 08-09, we were granted these domestic powers as well. And they had been extended a few times, I think until roughly 2013. So as of now, we know we have them until 2021. But again, I want to stress that there's a lot that we're able to do to provide support to Canadian companies. For those who don't know EDC, it's really around the working capital and the risk mitigation solution. So the main program is this business credit availability program, whereby we're providing a loan guarantee for 80% to your financial institution to get you some working capital to help you get through this COVID-19 pandemic. But there's a lot of other programs that we provide. If we have time during the Q&A later, I can touch on some of that. But really just wanted to stress that we're there for Canadian companies, whether you export or not, to help you get through this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Brian. David McConkey is with us. He's a senior account manager with the Business Development Bank of Canada. And David, can you tell us a little bit about what your organization is doing right now to help businesses?
Thanks, James. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be part of the panel. So BDC, as Brian mentioned, a lot of different things that the federal government has provided to the Canadian economy, small, medium, and large business. It really depends upon what the client's needs are. The biggest thing that we did when the pandemic was announced was really helping to postpone principal payments for existing clients. So across the country, we have approximately 60,000 clients, and it felt like most of them were calling us, not once, but maybe twice that week. So we did our best. We got that first round of postponements mostly completed now. Then we moved into working capital solutions. So BDC has rolled out a COVID working capital term loan. It's over a 3-year term, if you will. And the amount of that loan is really coming up with understanding what the client's carrying costs are for 6 months. So understanding what costs that they can't defer, what fixed costs they have. It's also important when the client comes to us that they can show us how they've been impacted by the pandemic. Some companies, unfortunately, we have not been able to help because they could not demonstrate that they were profitable up to the point of the pandemic. So it's really important that it's not clients understand that it's not a government bailout for companies who have lost money in the past. Unfortunately, this is not a product to help them at this point. It's really to help companies who were doing well, but this really knocked them off alignment, I guess, if you will, for having another strong year. So we're helping companies with that. It is a subsidized rate, as I mentioned, over a 3-year period with a balloon at the end of 3 years, which I'm sure will be open to refinancing and terming out again at that point for companies who would not have the ability to pay that balloon payment. Under the BCAP program, as Brian mentioned, BDC is offering as well guarantees of up to 80%, and these loans, depending upon the company's ability, of course, to repay and what their needs are, is up to $6.25 million. And these applications would be administered by the charter banks. So we do remain open to speaking to customers as well as prospects, and we're very happy to help. We're trying to extend as much reach, I guess, if you will, to a number of clients. And the bank has certainly deployed a number of internal employees into credit to help make sure that we get money to these companies, struggling companies, in time so that they can reopen. We have a lot of companies who were closed the last 2 months, factories, whatnot, across the country. So it's very imperative that all hands are on deck trying to help out.
Thank you, David. And finally, over to our New Brunswick arm of all of this, Seth Black. He's a financing specialist with Opportunities New Brunswick. And Seth, could you tell us a little bit about OMB's approach to this and the different resources that are available?
Yeah, thanks, James. I appreciate you getting everyone together on this call and providing an update to the community at large. I think there's definitely some misinformation that we've seen flowing around, and kind of some of your financial tips and things like that were well received, because a lot of the similar information that we've been distributing to a number of New Brunswick businesses specifically. So when the pandemic hit, the provincial government allocated a total of $50 million to help support New Brunswick businesses through the COVID-19 crisis. That's been broken into two distinct loan programs. So to kind of preface all of this, I'd encourage anyone who has any questions, whether it be getting back to kind of business as usual or opening your workplace back up, to reach out to our Business Navigator group. Those who don't know about the Business Navigator group, we've got a dedicated team who have both email and phone line capabilities to basically receive questions from the public when it comes to their business specifically. They can help guide you through some of the different loan programs that both the province has and some of the federal government programs as well, and just really are a knowledge base for New Brunswick businesses. So speaking specifically to some of those working capital programs, it has been divided up into kind of two categories. We're kind of saying our small business versus the medium and large. So on the small business side of things, they can access working capital loans up to $100,000. And the government is actually partnered with CBDC to help administer that program. And that was based on a kind of a volume of request basis to make sure that we had enough boots on the ground that we could process all these loans in a timely fashion and really get money out the door as soon as possible. So that's something that we've been seeing funding for the last number of weeks, kind of getting right to the top of the heap and helping people out right in the early onset of the pandemic so that they had access to working capital. There are a few different requirements around that. Again, I would encourage people to check out the CBDC webpage. There's a link right on the front cover there, or again, reach out to our Business Navigator group to help navigate that program. The other program that was announced was the working capital loans above 100,000. That's being administered by ONB. And we're making those working capital loans available to employers to, again, support that kind of cash flow requirement that's come forward from the pandemic. Similar to Dave's comments surrounding the viability of the business pre-COVID-19 is also that's coming into a consideration. Again, it's not a bailout as much as it's just support to help good, strong New Brunswick businesses continue to operate, make sure that they're able to keep their employees on the payroll and try to stay as whole as possible throughout the pandemic. So again, that working capital program would be in excess of $100,000 up to $1 million. And again, they can apply directly through ONB. So I would encourage everyone to check out the ONB website. I've been sharing a number of items through my LinkedIn. So I'd encourage people to pop over to LinkedIn. There's lots of good resources there on both the ONB page, as well as some personal information that I've been sharing as well. But yeah, I look forward to any specific questions as part of the roundtable, and appreciate everyone's time today. Thanks again, James.
Thank you, Seth. I think when we look at this all together, it can sound overwhelming because there are a number of programs. And again, we are all in this together. And what I hope to be able to demonstrate here is to be able to let you know about the resources that are out there, but to emphasize that we are collaborative. And the thing is, partnerships are really important right now. We have to work together in a different way than we have in the past and navigate through the complexity, because as we all know, these programs, they have been moving on us. It's been difficult for all financial institutions to keep up. But I think the commitment, when you look at it locally, we all know each other and we all have the same objective in that we want to help. So with that, Tanya, I will turn the line back over to yourself and see if there's any questions that we have on the line. And what I'd like to emphasize here is that if we do not have the answers, we want to have these questions so that we can come back as a follow-up, so that we can give an update. And at least we're going to learn what you're thinking, what you're feeling out there, and what information you need.
Thank you, James and Robert, and thank you everybody else who has spoken and joined. Brian, David, Seth, thank you. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can turn on your mics right now and ask those questions. Or if you're feeling a little shy and don't want to speak or be seen, you can definitely write it in the chat.
while we're waiting for a question, I will actually turn it back over here to be able to ask a follow-up question to Brian, David, and Seth. Either one of you can jump in here to be able to look at this. But I'm just curious, if you were to point to some of the key resources that you will be able to go back to be able to find out about the programs you had mentioned, if there's any key tools that you would recommend, is there anything that you would share?
Sure, I'll just speak up that one there. Of course, our website has a lot of information on bdc.ca, has a lot of information on client resources, as well as there's tools there to help with cash flow. BDC as well has an advisory arm for clients who want to take care of their cash flow. We do have cash flow management tools, if you will, and other tools available to help them as they try to kind of restart their business and look towards projecting their sales and getting the legs back on. So we certainly are cognizant that clients are certainly stressed, and there are obviously some resources available for them.
I think that's a great point, Dave. I have to say, though, because I have gone back to look at those BDC resources, and there are some really good tips out there, some really good articles on managing cash flow. And there's even access, I noticed, to some of the tools that if you wish to be able to go back and try to use some of those spreadsheets to be able to do your own projections, that you can. And this could be a great spot to be able to start and get some good ideas. So I have to commend your organization on the resources that have been put out.
Thank you.
We do have a question from Emma. Emma asks, how do you treat/approach startups that were not yet profitable when COVID-19 hit?
That's a great question. It really is. And, I guess the challenge with if you look specifically to the resources that are available out there, is a lot of the programs that are out in terms of lending solutions, they're designed for businesses, or they're emphasizing that they were already financially viable prior to COVID-19 hitting. So that can create some challenges in terms of looking at accessing those resources. And I think really in a time like this, if it is a startup, this really is a bootstrap period. This really is thinking like a startup to be able to look at, what do you do going forward? It's very difficult to be able to say, well, here's a specific, approach to that. But I really think the opportunity is to work with, if whoever your financial services provider is to go back to be able to have the discussion and be able to lay out, okay, well, here are my challenges right now. And from there, you look at what resources does that business have right now? What does that owner or that operator, that startup person, what do they have there right now? And what is their plan? So this is still an opportunity to think differently, but to still understand what your financial requirements are. Rob McNally spoke early, great point about understanding your cash flow. And if you're a startup, it's the same concept still applies. So it's not that there's a specific program, but I think start with that mindset around being a startup, understanding your numbers and what your requirements are, and to be able to work with your lender on it to see if there's another resource. Sometimes it's a personal solution, lending solution, or out there could also be another different type of government program that's there. But that's the benefit of being able to be in a collaborative environment and being able to work with parties such as those that you have on the phone, and to be able to come up with a plan.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, James.
Maybe Brian here from EDC, just to kind of interject and add one more thing to that is, for those maybe who haven't yet taken a look at it, their Government of Canada also announced the Canada Emergency Business Account. It's the $40,000 interest-free loan. Up to $10,000 of that could be forgivable. So I know the government's made a number of changes to that over the last weeks, if not months. So certainly, that's probably one where it might be easier to access than some of these other programs that we've discussed. If your business maybe wasn't profitable or was maybe cash flow negative prior to all of this, it's still a good program to take a look at, and it's opening up for companies who may not have been eligible for it a couple of weeks ago, might find themselves eligible for it now.
That's a great point, Brian. It is. And as well, I think as to what Seth had spoken to earlier with regards to CBDC and those $100,000 working capital loans that are out there now and how they're administering. So that might be something else. Once you dig into the specifics of that business and be able to look at seeing if something that could work.
Great. Thank you, guys. Does anybody else have any more questions? You can unmute yourself.
And while we're waiting, then I'm going to go back to that question I asked earlier. And Dave was graciously jumped in with some great tools and resources, or a reminder with BDC. In terms of looking at other resources that are available there, if there was any key websites, if there was any other key spot that you would recommend to go to for any sort of advice or guidance on, or other tools that you think that could benefit the business community, is there anything that you would add, Seth or Brian?
I can jump in. Again, I guess I spoke about it earlier, but one of the most key resources that I think is available to New Brunswick businesses specifically is our Business Navigator line. And again, they're taking questions on all kinds of things, have contacts behind the scenes to help kind of flush that information out, whether it be with different government departments. So they can act as kind of a key quarterback to businesses to help find the information. Again, there is a lot of information out there. It might not be something that they know right offhand, but with our kind of black book of other key business relationship groups and other government support functions, we're able to help reach out and kind of connect people or help them navigate. So like I say, whether it's starting back to business and there's some changes and guidelines that are in place, and a lot of business owners have been reaching out wondering how they manage and stay operational within the new requirements. And again, just from an inquiry standpoint, I encourage anyone to reach out, pick up the phone, shoot us off an email. Again, a quick Google search for Business Navigator ONB. Again, the email address is navnb@navnb.ca. So shoot us off a message, and like I say, we're happy to answer questions. We're getting a fairly large volume of stuff every time we turn into a new recovery stage within the province. We usually have a spike in questions that come out of it, but like I see, the team's well equipped to turn that information around really quickly and help people can get back to the new normal.
Thanks, Seth.
And from an EDC perspective, so we've really adapted our website as well to highlight the support, not only the support that EDC is providing, but a lot of the other government programs. So if you go to our website, it's really front and center. We also have a team at EDC called the Export Help Team. Again, to stress that just because it says export doesn't mean that you have to be an exporter to take advantage of it. But our Export Help Team, if you have any questions whatsoever, really business related, or questions around support through this COVID pandemic, they will provide, they have some stuff that is kind of already developed. So they for one of them, for example, is this Team Canada resource where it outlines, by region, different programs, whether it's through ONB, EDC, BDC, ACOA, other partners that are out there. So they outline some of the programs that are available there. But if it's something that you can't find online, they'll do the research and send you those resources, to save you the time from actually having to go look for them.
James, I'm just going to jump in. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say that's all available through our website.
I just want to jump in quickly and just acknowledge, the partnerships that we have with these organizations, EDC, BDC, ONB, ACOA. And as I said, I think they're becoming more and more important. And I think what I don't want people to do, or listening or on the line, is, there's a lot of information online, and that's very important. And I think it's great to have these resources. But if you, find yourself in a bit of a circling pattern and unable to kind of find out where to go, please pick up the phone and call someone. Call someone within our partnership group. If you call someone from EDC, they'll be able to connect you with BDC or ONB or TD or one of the banking institutions. I think use your network. Don't be afraid to call. It's okay to be confused. This is a very changing environment. There's a lot of stuff happening. The programs are changing constantly. There's many programs available. I often say, being in the financial world and looking at all of the programs that are available, it can be a lot to take in. So again, I think make sure you're reaching out. Don't be afraid. A lot of people feel like, oh, if I reach out, it shows a weakness. I don't understand. please don't think that way. Please make sure you're reaching out to your partners, and it can be anyone within the circle, because we have all done such a great job of communicating internally with our partners to make sure that we're servicing everyone the best we can. But again, I think the key message here is just be sure to reach out. Don't sit back and try to figure this all out by yourself. We need to work together, and we need to move the economy forward, and we want to do whatever we can to help.
That's a great point, Brian. And again, I just have to echo those comments, and it feels like there's so many more resources out there right now. Definitely reach out to your network. And again, we're here to collaborate and work through this, because we're all working through the uncertainty. And a lot of these programs, they are evolving as they go along, and we've seen it, all of us have, and it creates that wrinkle of complexity. But once you understand the person and their business, then you can start to peel back the onion, look at some ideas to be able to put it together. So there's no one silver bullet, I think, to be able to kind of take care of everything. And collaboration is definitely going to be key. Tanya, do we have any other questions on the line?
We do not have any other questions at the time. Does anybody have any last comments before we finish up? It's 10:53, so we want to make sure that we stick within that hour time. Yeah, any last words?
Well, I think I'll close things off here. First, thank you everybody for taking the time. I'm hoping we've given some perspective in terms of that this is a complex environment for lenders, and there is going to be some due diligence involved, additional due diligence in looking at credit requests. And the thing is to be ready to tell the story of your business, what you're going through, and be able to demonstrate what your real financial requirements are. After all, these are deferral programs, and these are loans that still have to be repaid. So it's important to have a plan. You may not have all the plan together, but the thing is to be able to have something to start with and that you can adapt as you go along. I also have listed down through here to the presentation, there is a series of web links that are here. I will, as a part of the follow-up to this and a recap, I will have a copy of this presentation to be able to send out. If you have any specific questions, because oftentimes when it comes to people and money, sometimes people are a little tight-lipped. Maybe they do have other questions out there that they're afraid to ask. My email address is up at the top there, and I will be so bold as to put it forward. I don't know what I'm going to receive back, but I certainly will put it forward, because my intention is to help here today. And I know that's the same thing for my colleagues here at TD, as well as our partners that are on the line. So thank you very much to everybody. I wish you good health, and I'm looking forward to New Brunswick coming out on top and being able to get things operating again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Again, thank you to all the presenters today. We really appreciate you doing this. Just a reminder that this session has been recorded and will be shared on YouTube probably by the end of the day, and that anybody on this call will be able to share it as well if anybody has any questions. So thank you. Have a lovely day, and I hope everybody enjoys the sunshine this week. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.